Hello everyone. In this video, we're just going to take a quick look at the app we are building. Okay, so if you haven't seen this yet, this is what we're building. It's a chat application. Now, keep in mind, it's only visual, it's not functional. So if I type in a search here, it doesn't do anything. Neither does the add conversation button down here. Or if you click on anything, it doesn't toggle anything over here. Neither does the bin and so on and so forth, right? But the idea is that we're using Flexbox to lay out things like these conversation items. We're using it to stretch out inputs. We're using it to separate, in this case, a title from a bin icon. We're using it to stretch out inputs. We're pushing things in reverse directions, i.e. the most recent message is at the very bottom and the oldest is at the very top. We're taking advantage of flex basis, where we've got these speech bubbles only going about 70% of the way across, and so on and so forth, right? So this is what we're going to be working on over the next 15 or so videos, something like that. And where we're going to start, though, is with this, which is a very blank screen with just a background on it. So from a HTML and CSS point of view, I have this as a resource that's linked to the video, as well as the final output. But the initial HTML and CSS we'll be dealing with is this. So we'll have some basic rules for margins and paddings by resetting everything. As I said, box sizing, I always set the border box on everything. I've set the HTML and the body to be 100% high, so that we don't have to worry about heights here. And I've also set some linear gradients, font sizes, and obviously the font, which I'm just using Arial, okay? For the chat HTML, I literally have this, which is nothing inside the body element and two style sheet references with the title saying chat app. As far as all the other files are remaining, I just have some images. One for the search box, or the search icon, sorry, that's linked to the box here, which is this little logo here. And basically the rest of it is just profile images representing the people that we have in the application. All right, so that's it. So let's get started. Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to be working on building the basic shell. So let's get to it. Okay, so hopefully you've been able to pull down the starting app zip file from the previous video, and you've been able to load a screen that looks like this, right? If you click on the chat.html, or you're running it like I am and you're using the live server. Now, the objective of the video is to go from having a blank canvas to building out a basic shell like this. So a window that's about this wide and this high, and inside of it we have a very small sidebar, and then what looks to be a very short-ish chat section, except that the chat section will be designed to go all the way across, okay? So the first thing I want to do is get this main white shell bit in play, okay? So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to my HTML first and go div ID, and I'm going to give an ID of chat container. All right, now if I come back to my original tab and I save, well, we're not going to see anything, and we're not going to see anything because we haven't styled it yet. So with that said, I'm going to come to my base.css file, and I'm going to provide some CSS here via my first snippet. Okay, and the first snippet I'm going to use is ldfc app chat container styles. All right, and when I tab this, you're going to get a CSS selector that looks like this. Now, if you're not using my extension, well, you can grab it from the chat-container.css file resource that's linked to this video. Now, what this chat container CSS is doing is it's setting some min and max widths and some max heights, and then this height that indicates, you know, what it should look like if you're under the 800 pixels of height for the window, and then a background color of white and some border radius. So if I save this, it's going to look something like this, right? So it's not actually aligned properly, but it's just from the top left-hand corner, it's spanning across 1000 pixels because we have enough pixels to have 1000, and the height is 800 pixels. The other thing that you need to note is that when I shrink the vertical part of the window below 800 pixels, the chat window shrinks with it, okay? So this is something I've added. Now, obviously the objective is to get this chat window into the middle of the screen like that, okay? So this is your first challenge. So have a think about how you can do that. Pause the video, give it a go, and come back to me in a moment. Were you able to work that out? If so, fantastic. If not, well, I'll show you right now. So what I like to do when I first set up an application is I like to set some default flex settings before I do anything. So the first thing I normally do is for a universal selector, I'll set everything to have no flexing whatsoever. So 0, 0, 0%. And this is the same as going flex equals none. Right? Except I don't like to use none. I like to use 0, 0, 0% because I know exactly what all the values mean. Then I also like to set a flex flow to something. For this application, I set it to row and no wrap. Now this is the default, so you can leave this out if you want and it will still work, but I just like to explicitly set it anyway. Next thing I'm going to do is define what my flex container is going to be for the chat application. So if I look at the HTML, I can see that the chat container is inside the body element, so therefore the body element has to have a display of flex on it. So I'll come down and go body, and I'll set display flex. And when I save this, well, one thing happened, but I'll get to that in a minute. But you can see it still hasn't changed its alignment. So we can do that easily using justify content to center, which will put it horizontally in the center, and then align items to center as well. And that now will vertically center it as well. Now, the one thing you may have noticed or may not have noticed, I don't know, it depends on how good your eye is, but the chat window actually shrunk. It's not 1000 pixels like it is here, right? Because we have enough space to store 1000. It's actually shrunk to 800 pixels. Now, why is that? Well, let's think about what we did here. I set a flex value to 0, 0, 0%, right? And what that's saying is we're not going to flex or we're not going to grow, right, at any rate. So, and we've also have a 0%. So that's saying go as small as possible. So as small as possible for this window is whatever the min width was defined for the chat container, which happens to be 800 pixels here, right? But we want to make sure that it can grow to 1000, right, when we have that space. So the first thing we need to do is come down and fix that by adding a flex value for the chat container. So flex, we're going to make it grow, we can make it shrink if we want, and I'm not going to set any initial size. And when I do this, now the window grows again to be a max value of 1000 pixels, right? However, if I shrink the window now, whoops, wrong one. If I shrink this window to now go below 800, you can still see we've got those round borders there, or you might not be able to. You can try this yourself, but once we get under 800 pixels, then we're no longer shrinking, okay? So that's kind of one thing that we just need to fix quickly there and move on. Now, the next step is to get the sidebar and the chat window in play, okay? So let's think of the HTML for that. So come back over to chat.html, and what I'm thinking is to add 2 more divs. So we'll have a div with an ID of sidebar, right? And then we'll have another div with an ID of, let's say, chat window. And let's just grab the content from the finished product here and put it inside of those divs for the moment. All right, and just quickly, let's read what it says. For the sidebar, it says the content will determine the width of this bar. Okay, so we're not going to be setting any explicit size on this sidebar. We're just going to let the content push it across. All right, and for the chat window, well, let's grab the text and put it in. And what this one says is this section will grow to fit the rest of the space. So what we're saying is we want this right here to span all the way across. So before we deal with the Flexbox side of things, let's style them up so they look like this here in terms of having the blue and, well, basically the blue and the rounded edges here, right? Because at the moment, this is what we have. Okay, it's just two divs at the top. So let's get in play with the blue. So I'm going to come back over to my base.css and I'm going to add my second snippet. Now, once again, this snippet is defined in the resource to this video and it's called chat-container-contents.css. The snippet that we're going to use though is ld fc app chat container content styles. And when I tab this, now we're going to get a selector for the sidebar, which gives us a background color and some border radius, and then a selector for the chat window, which gives us border radius in different directions. Now, the 10 pixels is just defining the edges here to match the edges of the chat container, right? Otherwise, what you'll end up having is when you set a background color, you will see a square edge on the edge here rather than a round one. So that's why it's there. So if I save this now, well, we're going to get this, right? Where the sidebar is still at the top, but if you look closely, it does have those rounded edges here on the left-hand side. So now we need to deal with getting the sidebar and the chat window to look like this, okay? So once again, I'm going to challenge you guys to try this yourself. So pause the video and go and have a go and get back to me in a moment. Were you able to work it out? If so, fantastic. If not, well, we'll go through it right now. So the first thing we need to do is we need to define this chat container as being a flex container. So come over to flex.css and we're going to set a value of display flex, okay? Now, if we save this, it almost looks like we've got what we wanted, but not quite. So the sidebar is exactly how we want it. We want it to be as wide as the contents inside of it, right? And we're happy with that. However, if we look at the chat window bit, we can see that the text is all squashed up here. So that is because if I look at the developer toolbar for this, and I scroll this back a bit so we can see the actual window. If I look at this, we can see that it's not spanning all the way across the screen. It's not growing, all right? So we just need to quickly provide a flex value for the chat window so that it will grow across the screen. So let's quickly do that. So chat window, flex, grow. You can make it shrink if you want. I'm not going to make it shrink. And then 0%. And when I save this, now if we check developer toolbar once more, we can see that it's now spanning all the way across. And that is exactly the same as the output we now have here. So that's it for this video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to be working on building the sidebar. So let's get to it. Okay, so the objective of this video is to get the sidebar from this to this. Okay, so we're going to have a little search section at the top here. We're not going to worry too much about the spacing at this point because we're going to address those issues later. Then we've got a conversation list area, which is this big square here. And then at the very bottom, we've kind of got that add conversation section where once again, I'm not worrying too much about the size of things, okay? So that's the objective of this video. So with that said, let's look at the HTML that we want to write to get this in play, okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to remove this text that is inside of the sidebar, and I'm going to replace it with some HTML. So the first bit I want to get is that search part. So I'm going to have a div here with an ID of search container. All right. And inside of this search container, I want to have that input that we can see up here. Okay. So it's just going to be a standard input for this design. So we'll just say type text, and we'll give it a placeholder that represents that search part, right? Now, if I come back over to our current one and save, we can now see we get this, okay? Now, we'll finish off the rest of the HTML before we worry about presentation. And so the next thing is to add this conversation area where I've got the text. This needs to grow downward. So I'm going to add another div for this. So div ID, and I call it conversation list. All right, and this later on will hold all the conversations that we have for our chat application. And here I'm just going to put this needs to grow downward. And that's just kind of indicating right now that we want this particular element to grow. Save that, come back and take a look, and we can see not much improvement there, just a bit of text at the moment. Now, we want to be able to get that very last bit down here, which is the thing with the plus in it, which is basically a new message container. That's what I'm going to call it anyway. So create another div, give it an ID of new message container. And inside of it, I'm going to have an anchor tag, which doesn't do anything. It just basically references this page. And we'll add a plus symbol, right? And that plus symbol represents the big plus symbol that we see down here. Now, obviously, when I look at it here, we don't really see much. You know, we've got a horrible input. We've got the text at the top here. And it's very hard to even see the plus symbol because it's probably in blue, all right? So I'm going to come over now and apply some styling just to format a few of these things. So I'm going to come to my base.css file, and underneath everything I've written so far, I'm going to include another snippet. So it's LD, FC, app, sidebar, content, styles, like that. And if I tap this, we're going to get a lot of CSS here, starting with the search container. All right, so we're adding some padding to the search container. We're adding a box shadow to it. We're modifying some of the stuff in the input. I'm not going to go through all this, but basically it'll have a little search icon in it. It's got some background sizing, positioning. The font size is increased a little bit. The padding and borders and all that have been applied, and some font weight and all that other stuff, right? Then I'm doing some stuff on the placeholder text that's already in there, just making sure that has some bolding in a certain color. And then we've got the new message container, which is the bit down here. And we're making sure that that's got a border top on it and some padding. And then the anchor element, which is the little plus symbol, that's going to come out to be a certain size and also basically be a blue color, okay, with some rounded edges and things like that. So if I now save this, we can see we get this result. Now, for those of you that aren't using snippets, I've included all this CSS in the side-bar.css file for the resources accompanying this video, okay? So now we get to this point and we're like, okay, that's all good. We've got all the elements kind of where we want them. Now we just need to do the flex changes to get them into the position that we want based on the fact that we want to go from this to that. So we want to be able to push this new message area to the bottom, have this middle bit grow, and then keep the search thing at the very top. So before I go any further, have a think about how you might do that, right, yourselves. Maybe pause the video, give it a go, and then come back to me in just a moment. So were you able to work it out? If yes, then fantastic. If not, I'll show you how to do it right now. So basically what we need to do is we need to make the sidebar have a display of flex on it, okay? And then we're going to make it go in a column-based direction. That's step number one. So I'm going to come down, I'm going to create the sidebar selector, and then I'm going to go display flex. And if I save this, well, we don't get what we want at the moment because it's still going in a row-based direction. So then we go flex direction is column, and now we go downwards, right? Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to make this middle element grow, right? This conversation list. Well, we know we can do that using the flex property and setting the grow value. So hash conversation list flex grow, yes. At this point we won't shrink it, and we'll set the initial value to 0%. Save this, and now you can see we get the result that we want. So if we compare the two, you can see there is no difference. So obviously we've got everything positioned where we want it, but it still looks a little bit ugly. So next video, we're going to tackle this top search section and make it look more presentable. So I'll see you all then. Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to be working on building the search section. So let's get to it. Okay, so the objective of this video is to get the search area looking from this big squash piece here to this. A beautiful looking search box in the middle of a search area, okay? Now, just for context, the height of this search area here is 71 pixels high, and the input itself is 30 pixels high, okay? It's also centered in the middle of the search area. So the challenge for you guys is to try and think of how we can achieve this using nothing but Flexbox. So pause the video, have a go at doing this yourself, and come back and see me in just a moment. Were you able to work it out? If yes, great. If not, I'm going to show you once again how to do this. So basically how I see this laid out is that we already know that the search container is inside of the sidebar, right? So if we look at our HTML, and we can see the search container is inside of the sidebar, and it has an input inside of it. So it itself can be a container, i.e. we can set display flex on it. But firstly, let's try and get the height of this thing correct. So to do that, let's come over to the flex.css, and under the conversation list here, I'm going to add a selector for the search container, like so, right? Now on this, I'm going to set a flex of, I don't want it to grow, I don't want it to shrink, and because I said that the height needs to be 71 pixels, I'm just going to specify 71 pixels here. And when I do that, and I click on the right tab here, you will see that it's now grown to 71 pixels. Now the search box is still all the way up the top, but we're going to fix that right now. So the next thing we can do is get the search box directly into the middle of this area. So to do that, we can set the display on this to be flex, which then makes it stretch like that, and that's fine. We'll deal with this later. We can put justify content, put it in the center, even though it already looks like it's in the center. As you can see, it makes no change. And then we can set align items as well to center. All right, so that gets the box in the middle of the screen, and the height of the input is basically as high as it needs to be to fill the content that's inside of it. So now we need to resize the input, okay? And that's pretty straightforward. We just come down and we can go search container like that, input, and set the flex to be, we don't want it to grow, we don't want it to shrink, and I mentioned that it needs to be 30 pixels high. All right, so I can just save this, and that didn't work for some reason. flex 0, 0, 30 pixels, search container input. Why did this not work? I know why. Because the search container also needs to have a flex direction of column for this to work. And now we get what we're looking for. So the reason why I had to specify column is because the fact that I'm using a flex basis value here of 30 pixels, that moves in the direction of the main axis, right? So we need to put the main axis going downward so that we can set the size of this thing correctly. So that's why I need to add the column part, right? So that's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to tackle doing the add conversation area down here. So I'll see you all then. Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to be working on building the add conversation section. So let's get to it. Okay, so the purpose of this video is to fix the add conversation section down here and go from this to this, right? So we've got a higher area here and the button is fully round, it's aligned to the left, and it has the plus symbol directly in the middle of the button, right? We take a look at what we've got here. We've got a plus button that isn't circular, and we don't have all that padding around it. So just for context, the overall height over here of this add conversation section is exactly 78 pixels high, and the button is 40 pixels high by 40 pixels wide, right? And it's aligned directly to the left. The plus is directly in the middle of the circle, and the button is in the middle of this area here from a vertical direction. So, with all that in mind, how can we make this work using nothing but Flexbox? Once again, have a think about it, go away, try this yourself, and basically pause this video and come back to me in a moment. Okay, were you able to work it out? If so, great. If not, well, once again, I'll continue to show you the answer to the problem. So the first thing I'll look at when I see this is that I want to set the height appropriately, right? So we know that the parent container for the new message container is the sidebar, and if we look at our flex code, we can see that that's flowing in a column direction already. Now we know this because the search container also had a flex value set to 71 pixels, which made it 71 pixels high. So we just need to do the same thing down here for the add conversation section. So the first step is to come down and target the new message container and set flex to be 0, no growing, no shrinking, and 78 pixels. And if we save this and we go to the right tab once again, we can now see instantly that the section has grown to 78 pixels. Now the next step is to fix this button here, and that is to make sure that it sizes properly and is aligned to the middle, okay? So it's already aligned to the left-hand side the way we want it, so we don't need to worry about that, but we do need to get it in the middle. Now, because we're not using Flexbox yet for this area, the first thing we can do is set display flex on this, like so, and sorry, wrong selector, the one below it, display flex, like so, and save that. And you don't see any change because we haven't changed the direction of flex yet. Now there's a couple of ways we can do this. We can leave it going in a row-based direction and just use align items, which is what I'm going to do here. Or we can set it in a column-based direction and set the justify content to be center. I'm going to do the first option and just go align items center, like so. And when I save this now, we can see the button is at least aligned into the middle of the container. Now, we want to get this button to be a full button that is 40 pixels wide by 40 pixels high. Now, before I get to the Flexbox part, I just want to quickly point out I made a mistake in my base.css, even though it didn't really affect anything. I had this width 40 pixels. I'm actually going to delete this now and just save it. Now, it doesn't make any change overall, but it was a redundant rule that wasn't needed. So back to Flexbox. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to target this individual anchor tag here and give it a flex value. All right, so next thing I'm going to do is go new message container. I'm going to target that anchor tag, and we're going to go flex is equal to no grow, no shrink, 40 pixels. And when I do that, now we get that full circle that we want, right? However, the plus is not in the middle anymore. It's just on the far left-hand side. So now we want to get the plus in the middle. Well, how do we achieve that? We can set the anchor tag to be display flex. And when we do that, it still hasn't done anything, but then we can come in and go, okay, cool. What we're going to do now is go align items to the center, and we're also going to say justify content is center as well, and save. And finally, we get the button exactly where we want in that area of the add conversation section. So that's it for this video. In the next video, I think we're going to start looking at the other side of the ledger here, basically building the chat section over here. So we'll have a title, we'll have a chat message area, and then we'll have the submit the chat message down here section. So I'll see you all in the next video. Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to be working on building the chat window. So let's get to it. Okay, so the purpose of this video is to get most of the features on the chat window, i.e. if we look at what I'm trying to target, it's the title, this growing message list here, and the form at the very bottom, okay? We're not trying to do much else than that. So we need to get these three elements in place. How can we do that? Well, I'm going to come to the HTML and I'm going to create 3 new divs. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a div with an ID of chat title. And here, what I'm going to set up is a bit of text that says, this is the title, like so. Pretty straightforward. You can see nothing major up the top at the moment. Now I'm just going to add another div for the message list. It's going to be called chat message list, like so. And here I'm just going to write this needs to grow downward. All right. And save that. So we've got one more div there. And finally, ID, we're going to have a chat form. And this one will just say, this is the form section, like so. And we save all these, and we get this nonsense up here. It doesn't look very clean at the moment. So let's add some styling to this. So to do that, I'm going to come over to my base.css, and I'm going to add a new snippet, okay? So this one will be LD, FC, app, chat, window, content, styles. And once again, the CSS that's about to be pulled out of this snippet is a resource linked to this video. So I click tab, and basically we get all this CSS here, which basically says we got a chat title, it has a slightly grey background, some padding, some border radius, the font size is increased, and the color, right? For the chat list, we're just adding a bit of padding left and right. And for the chat form, once again, a little bit of grey background, some extra padding, some borders and border radiuses, and so on and so forth. So if I save this now, you're going to get this right here. Now, if we compare it to what we have currently, we're nearly there, okay? What we need to do now is make sure that this middle section, this message list, grows as much as it can grow, and that as a result of that, the form section is at the very bottom, okay? So I want you to have a think about how we can do that using Flexbox and give it a try. So pause the video, go and have a go, and come back to me in a moment. Were you able to work it out? If so, great. If not, well, let's get to it and find out how we do it right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to my Flex CSS, and I need to identify that this chat window, which is now a parent container, needs to have a display of Flex on it. So I come up to my chat window selector, and now I instantly set a display of Flex on this. And when I save this and I hit the right tab, what you're going to get is this, which is not what we want, and that's fine, because then we just set Flex direction to column, like so. And now we're kind of back to where we were. You're like, okay, well, what was the point of that? Well, now that the container is deemed Flex, we can size the message list area so that it grows as far as it can grow, okay? So we're going to come down to the very bottom of this and create a new rule, and it'll be the chat message list rule. And all we have to do here is set it to grow. At this point, we're not going to shrink, and 0%. And when we do this, now we get exactly what we want, which is the title at the top, the message list area that grows all the way down, and then the form section at the very bottom. And that's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to improve the title section and make it basically in line with the search section, and also add things like a little bin icon to the right hand side here, and obviously fix the title as well. So I'll see you all in the next video. Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to be working on building the chat title section. So let's get to it. Okay, so the point of the video is to update this chat title to look from this to this. So we're going to basically center the person's name, adjust the height of the overall title, and then we're going to also add this little bin symbol here on the right hand side, okay? So with that said, the first thing I'm going to do is update the content of the title bar for this one here, because it just says this is the title. And to do that, I'm going to use a snippet. Now, this snippet is included as a resource for this video as chat-title.html. Snippet I'm going to use is ld-fc-app-chat title contents, like so, right? And when I press tab, you're going to get a lot of information here, such as a span tag with whatever name you want to put in it. So I'm going to put my name in here. And then you're going to get an SVG output that I've basically pulled down from the internet that represents the trash symbol that you're going to see. So if I now save this, we're going to see pretty much nothing in the sense of the trash bin, and that's because the trash bin actually requires a stroke color, which we have not provided in CSS. We also have not given the right dimensions, so the title bar at the moment has gone all the way down here, okay? So next thing we need to do is we need to come over to the base.css and just add a little snippet here as well. So again, this one is included in the resources as chat-title.css, and the snippet name is ld-fc-app-chat-title contents styles, content-styles. And then you'll get a little trash logo here. So this class selector matches the class that's given to the main SVG file here. And when we add it, we can now see we got the little trash symbol. So the little CSS that I just added here was to set a stroke color and was to set the height of the trash. Now SVGs, I believe, work in the terms of maintaining dimensions. So as long as you give either a width or a height, the width or height will change based on that outcome, okay? And that's to do with vector graphics and all that other kind of stuff, which is not the purpose of this course. Now, we've got everything that we want inside the bar. What we want to do now is set the title bar to be the same height as the search section over here. So with that said, I'm going to let you guys think about how you can do that, try it yourself, and then come back to me in a moment. Okay, so were you able to work it out? If so, great. If not, I'll show you right now. So all we really need to do to basically get the height down here is to remember that the height for the search area was 71 pixels high. So with that said, we just create a new selector for chat title, like so, and we just set its flex to not grow, shrink, and 71 pixels. And now you should get something that looks like this. Now, obviously, the next thing we want to do is we want to align both the name and the bin. So once again, it's aligned into the middle of the title area. And also, we want to be able to keep the name on the very left-hand side and the trash icon on the very right-hand side. So once again, I want you guys to think about what needs to be done there. Give it a try, pause this video, and come back to me in a moment. So how'd you go? Were you able to work it out? If so, great. If not, well, let's do it together right now. So I have a chat title and I have two items inside of it. I have a span and I have an SVG. So the first thing I'm going to do is set the chat title to use display flex. So I'll come down to chat title and I'll go display flex. And just by doing that, you would have done something very important, and that is that the trash bin disappeared. Now, the reason why this happened is when I set the parent to have a display of flex, then by default, every item will try to shrink as much as it can, and it will not try to grow, okay? And because most items have a 0% based on my starting point up here, the SVG has now said, okay, I'm going to go and be 0 size, right? So let's bring the trash bag back first. So to do that, or trash bin, I should say. To do that, I just go chat title, and I'm going to target I'm going to target this class that I have for that, which is trash logo. So let's do that. And I'm going to set the flex on this to not grow, not shrink, and to be 36 pixels wide. And when I do that, now the trash bin comes back. All right, so that's the first problem solved just by setting a display of flex. Next thing I want to do is I want to separate out the bin from the title so that the bin is as far away as it can be. So the first thing I will try is go justify content on the title, chat title, content, and try and use space between. So if you remember space between, it pushes the elements as far away from each other as possible. So when I do that, we do get that result, which is great, right? And now we want the text and the trash bin to align into the middle. So then we can set align items to be center. And now we're nearly there. The other thing I want to do is make sure that my full name goes all the way across and doesn't push down like this. Now, it may not be obvious, but if we look at the developer toolbar, what's actually happening is that particular element is also trying to shrink to fit its minimum size. And that comes back to the same problem of everything up here being 0.000%. So let's address that problem. And we can do that easily by going chat, title, child, selector, span, and I set a flex on it to grow, not shrink, and once again to use 0%, the initial size. And finally, when I do this, we get the result that we want, which is now the title goes all the way across. Now, once again, if I open up the developer toolbar and check it out, it should be growing as far as it needs to. And you can see that right there. So that's it for this video. In the next video, we're now going to look at the chat form section, basically by populating items in there and then fixing up the sizing of things. So I'll see you all in the next video. Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to be working on building the chat form. So let's get to it. Okay, so the objective of this video is to update this form section down here for what we've got right now to this. So having an attachment thing, it doesn't actually do anything, but it's just there for looks. And obviously an input where you would type the message. Again, it doesn't do anything. So the first thing I'm going to do is, first I'm going to jump back over to the right tab, and I'm going to update the content for the actual form, right? So coming down to my HTML, I'm going to use another snippet. Now the snippet I'm going to use is referred to as LD app chat form content, like so. Now, if you're not using the snippets, it's in the chat-form.html file in the resources that's matched to this video. So I click tab, and this is what I'm going to get. So an SVG, it has an ID of attachment logo, and then below that I have an input, which is of type text. Now I'm just going to make sure I tab this in a bit, just like so, because I accidentally indented it wrong, and save that. And the output I'll get is that, which is a very, very large attachment, right? So same as the previous video, we need to make some CSS changes. So to do that, I'm going to come over to my base.css, and I'm going to include yet another snippet. So this one is included as the chat-form.css file in the resources, and the snippet name is LD app chat form content styles. And we get this. So I've got a selected for the attachment logo. I'm setting the height to 32 pixels, putting a little bit of margin on the right hand side of it, and I'm filling it to be the same blue color as the trash bin, and obviously putting a pointer on it. And then for the input, I'm putting some padding around it, some border around it, changing the color, border radius, and the font size overall. Okay. So if I save this, this is what we get. Okay. So we can see that we still need to grow the form so that it's the same height as this add conversation section here. And then we also need to align the attachment thing vertically as well as the input. And then we're going to pretty much have the input grow to go across the remainder of the screen here. Okay. So have a think about how you would do that using Flexbox. Pause the video, go and give it a try, and come back to me in a moment. So were you able to work that out? If so, fantastic. If not, well, let's do it right now. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that the chat form section here is as high as this section over here, this add conversation part. So what I'm going to do is come down into my flex.css file and add a selector for the chat form. Or we could reuse, I think I might have one up here somewhere. No. Okay, so we'll have the new selector for the chat form. And I'm going to set the flex on this to not grow, not shrink. And I remember it was 78 pixels for this part down here. So if I save this, we now get the form area being the same height as the add conversation part. Cool. So the next thing I want to do is I want to be able to manage these things so that I can have the input grow all the way. So to do that, I need to set the chat form to have a display value of flex and save that. And then we realize all of a sudden, oh, wait a minute, we're not getting what we want. Number one, the attachments disappeared again. And we know this from the previous video as it's actually shrunk its width. So we need to address that. And also the input grew because we're using an align items value of stretch. It's grown to fill the entire height here. So there are two things we have to address first. So I come down, I'm going to address the attachment logo first. So that had an ID on it as attachment logo. I set the flex to not grow, not shrink, and the height of it was 32 pixels, so we'll just make the width the same and save that. So the attachment's back, and now we just need to prevent the stretching. So we go align items, and we set it to center. And when we do that, now we get this result. Now the last thing we need to do is make sure that the input grows all the way across. So I'm going to come down underneath chat form, and I'm going to new rule, chat form, and we're going to target the input. And I'm going to set the flex on this to be grow, don't shrink, and don't have an initial size. And save. And now, finally, we get the result that we wanted. So let's just compare the two. And they look the same to me. And that's the end of the video. So in the next video, what we're going to do is start looking at adding a conversation item, I guess, over here in the conversation list. So I'll see you all then. Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to be working on building an individual conversation item. So let's get to it. Okay, so what we're going to be doing in this video is adding our first conversation item. So we're going to be going from having an empty list like this to having something that looks like this. You know, an item that we can kind of hover over, and it has basically a name, like a time, and the message, and who the conversation person is, okay? In this case, it happens to be me, all right? So let's get started, and where I will start is with the HTML that I want to have that represents this conversation item. So I'm going to come over, and I'm going to delete this text here, and I'm going to add a div and give it a class of conversation, okay? And this is the first step. And if I save that and come back over to what we have, we literally have nothing at the moment, okay? Which makes sense. So that's kind of the overall container for the conversation item. Then I look and I go, okay, what do we have inside the conversation? Well, we have an image on the very left-hand side. And then next to that, we have all the information, all right? So the next thing I want to attack is getting this image in. So I'm going to come over and create an element for that. So I'm going to go image source equals, and I'm going to just hit my images folder, grab profiles, and you can grab whatever image you want. I'm just going to grab myself here, and then I give myself an alt of my name, all right? Nothing major there. So if I save this now and check what we have, we can see my image is now, you know, squeezed up to the very top corner, but it's inside of the conversation, right? Next thing I want to do is I want to look at how we have these items lined up. So it looks to me like the person's name and the date is kind of in the same row, even though the date is still a bit higher. That might be because the font size is a little bit different. So what I'm going to do is create two divs, one to represent this title information here, and another one to represent the actual message, right? So the first thing I'm going to think about, though, is that these things are kind of a fair way apart as well, right? So if I'm thinking of Flexbox, I'm probably thinking of using space between on these things. So we probably need an overall container as well to represent all this information. So with that said, I'm going to create a div and go class of, let's say, conversation details. Like so. And that kind of gives us not much more. You can't really see anything at this stage. But inside the conversation details, what I now want to have are two rows. So one that represents the title and the date, and another one that represents the message. So let's create the two divs. And I'm going to call the first one, we'll call it conversation title, because the date's kind of part of the title there. And the second one, I'm going to call a class of conversation message, I think. Yep, message. So we're kind of getting the structure that we want. We still haven't got any actual text in here though. So from what we can see at the moment, we don't see very much. We just have an image at this stage. Now it's time to fill in the actual information. So we have the actual title, right? And we have a date. So inside this conversation title, I'm going to add 2 more divs. And go div class is equal to, let's go title text. So that's the actual text that represents my name. And I'm going to put my name in there for the moment. And then the other thing we want is the date. So directly under that, I'm going to create another class and call this one created date. So I'm thinking this is going to be a creation date, the date when the conversation was created. So I do that, and I'm going to just put in APR 16, right, just for the moment. And come back to my original tab, save that, and well, we get this ugly looking piece of text for the moment because we actually haven't done any formatting in CSS. Now, just to finish things off, we want to grab the message, and so we put this inside of conversation message and just go, this is a message. And I think that's the markup that I'm going to use at this point. So save that, and we've got kind of the information that we want. Now, it's not in the format that we need, but let's address that right now. Now, the first thing I'm going to address is just the overall styles, i.e. having the white color, the hover, the cursor stuff, the color of the text, the actual roundness of the image, so on and so forth. So to do that, I'm going to come to my base.css file, and I'm going to use another snippet. So ld fc app chat not chat title. What am I doing? App conversation item styles. And when I do that, I get a lot of CSS. Now, once again, this information is in the resources section linked to this video. So first we have our conversation div. So I'm giving a color, a base color on that of #DDD. I'm setting the font size. I'm adding a border bottom so we get that line there. I'm adding some padding around everything so that we've got some padding that's a bit clean. And I'm actually also specifying a max width 300, just so that we don't grow beyond, a very long length. If we have a lot of text, we don't want to blow out to like 1,000 pixels wide, right? We want it to be at a certain rate, right? So I'm restricting that to 300 pixels. Then I've got a selector for if we add a class of active to the actual conversation as well, or we have a hover state. I'm changing the background color to the darker blue that you see with the border here, and also the same color as this. So we're adding that. I'm adding a cursor pointer when we hover over it. And then for the image, I'm adding a little bit of margin, so you can see that margin here. And I'm making sure that the width and height is always just 40 pixels. Right, so we don't want the image to be any bigger than that. And I'm explicitly setting the height of 40 pixels, just because when I set flex on these things, we want to maintain a height of 40 pixels here. And then I'm setting a border radius of 100%, which makes it look round, okay? For the title, which is this bit here, the bolded area, I'm adding bold. I'm adding a little bit of margin, so if these two things happen to get really close to each other, there'll still be a little bit of space between them. And I'm also changing the color up just a little bit, so it's a little bit lighter than the rest of the colors here. And then for the created date, I'm also setting the color, and obviously I'm making the font size a little bit smaller. So coming back over to what I have at the moment, if I save this now, we're going to get this. Okay, so we're getting the highlights, we're getting the hover state, all that other stuff, that beautiful stuff, it's all there. However, we're not getting the positioning of these items the way that we want. So that's where Flexbox now will kick into play. So I might leave this bit up to you for the moment. Go away, have a think about how we can get the information we have here to be in this position here, okay? Might seem really straightforward, but this is actually much trickier than you think. So this is probably the biggest challenge that you've had so far. So go away, pause the video, have a think about it, give it a try, and come back to me in a moment. Were you able to work it out? If so, fantastic. If not, well, let's do it right now. So the first thing I want to actually tackle is getting the details to pop up next to the image, right? So if we look at what we've got here, we've got the information all here, basically to the right of the image. So we know that the image and the conversation details are under the conversation div. So we can come up to our flex.css and we just add a new selector for .conversation and we set a display flex on this. Flex, like so. And when we do this, now we get the text on the right hand side. Now the other thing that we've noticed is that it's not growing all the way across, and we know this because of the way that the text is shrinking, okay? So that's the next step. We can come down and go, okay, we need to resize the conversation details part. So the second element here, we need to resize this. So we'll create a selector for that. So .conversation details and go flex is equal to, we're going to allow it to grow, not shrink, and set initial size of 0%. And now we get this, so we're partly there, but let's see what else we need to do. Firstly, I can see that the date's probably not in the right spot. We can see it's all the way over here. And then obviously the message, there's got a bit of gap between that and the title. So first let's deal with the date and get that in the right position. So we know that we classified the text here and the date under the one div, which is referred to as the conversation title div. So I'm going to come over to my flex.css. I'm going to add another selector for the conversation title div and put a display of flex on that one. And when I save that, now we get the date next to the title. But as you can see, it's kind of not all the way over to the right. And that's because both items are growing neither item is growing. And basically they're all shrinking to be the minimum text size, right? So the next thing we need to do is make sure this text is growing all the way or as much as it can. So we know that text is in a div called title text. So I'll come up and go .title text, set flex to 100%, save that. And now we get the name and the date on the right hand side. Now lastly, you can see here that the date is basically also collapsing and falling down. Now we can address this using Flexbox, but it's very hard to do. So there's actually a better way to do this, and it's using normal CSS, and it's referred to as the white space property. So if I come down here and go white space and go, I'm not going to wrap, and save this, then the date will actually grow a little bit to ensure that it doesn't wrap to the next line, okay? And that's just an easier way of dealing with that problem. Otherwise, we have to get into, trying to size it ourselves because this one's growing all the way and we don't know exactly how small that needs to be. So if we ever change the text of it, then we have to ensure that whatever size text we give for the date, it fits in and things like that. So it's just better just to go, okay, we're not going to wrap anything. All right, so that's why we have white space with no wrap. So that fixes that problem. Now, the last thing that I can notice here is that this is a message is still very close to the title here. Like if you check, you see it's pushed down here as opposed to here, where it's still squeezing up. So that's pretty easy to fix. We come back over our flex and we go, okay, I think the conversation details encapsulates both the lines. So all we need to do with this is go display of flex, like so, and give it a flex direction of column. And when we save this, we get this issue of things being squeezed together. but that's because of the fact that all items by default are 0% in size. So it's getting confused on what to do about it there. So basically all we need to do is come down to the conversation title and go, I'm going to set a flex on this to grow, not shrink, and be 0%. And when we do this, it actually now knows that this part should grow as far as it can grow. And then basically whatever the height of the message text is here will stay at the very bottom. So hopefully you got a good understanding of what I did here, and you got something similar in nature. Not an easy video to cover in terms of all the things that are going on. It seems like it should be easy when you look at it, but actually it ends up being more complicated. But, it's part of the game, right? So the last thing I want to mention in this video, which will lead into the next video, is what do we do if the text is more than the available space that we have here. For example, if I come in and go, after my name, I go, I don't know, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, and save, then what's happening right now is it's collapsing onto the next line, right? So we can do the same thing as we did before, and we can use the white space, right? But then there's some other conditions that you'll see that will cause issues. But I'm going to leave that for the next video. So for now, I'm just going to add some extra text here that creates problems. G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. That'll do. And you can see it also goes on to the next line. So we're going to deal with these sizing issues in the next video. Hello, everyone. In this video, we're going to be working on fixing conversation item sizing issues. So let's get to it. Okay, so as mentioned in the previous video, we were able to successfully create a conversation item. However, we do have some issues in regards to wrapping for the title and the message, okay? So that's what this video is going to be about. It's going to be about addressing this wrapping problem. So how I want to address it is I want to ensure that the text always remains on one line and basically cuts off before the date in this instance, and for the message cuts off before the end of the conversation, where the padding is. Now, it may not seem like it's a big deal here, but have a think about what would happen if we didn't address this problem. Say I had this much text for the title and save. This is what happens. It's going to grow downward. And if it grows downward, then obviously the conversation for this one person is going to take up most of the bar here. And we want to try and fit as many conversations in this list as we can. So to do that, we have to make sure that the title and the message always sit on one line only. So that's why I'm doing it, and that's why we're going to take on the challenge right now. So the first thing I can do is make sure the text is all on one line, and we know how to do this because we saw it with the date in the previous video. So if I come over to base.css, I know I can grab the white space of no wrap here and go up the title text and paste and save that. What happens though is because there's a lot of text, it does stay on one line. However, it just overflows out of the entire conversation area and in fact out of the whole document. So we need to address this problem, and this is not a Flexbox thing, but it's more of an overflow thing. So what I'm going to do is underneath the conversation image part, I'm going to add a selector for conversation details. Keeping in mind that represents this whole details area. I'm going to set the property overflow X to hidden. And when I do this, you're now going to see the text disappears from the chat area, chat window, and the rest of the application, and stays within the boundaries of the sidebar, right, and the conversation item. Now, the other thing you may not have noticed is the date's disappeared. And the date has disappeared because the title is still much longer than it needs to be, right? So we need to basically reduce the space here for the title and have it overflow as well. So to do that, pretty straightforward. We just come down and go overflow X is hidden on the title text. And when I do that, I finally get the date back. Okay. Now the title obviously ends and cuts off here, which is fine in terms of spacing. However, having the name with just DU and then nothing after it, not a ... or something like that, looks a little weird. So most people use the property text overflow and they set it to ellipsis so that at least it has a little ... there, which usually indicates there's more information right behind this text. So we've got the title kind of where we want to have it. Okay. So I'm going to come to my chat.html and I'm going to remove all this stuff because I'm happy with it. And I'm going to save. Now the message. So for the message, I'm going to make that longer as well. And so copy, paste, 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 save. And we can see we get a big long conversation item going downwards here. So once again, we want the message to be on one line. All right, so to do that, we can just go new selector, conversation message, and go, was it white space, no wrap, and save. And now we've got everything on one line, and we can see it's kind of cut off, right, which is great. But we also want to be able to overflow and put the ellipsis on this as well. So we're going to put overflow X of hidden and save that. And then, something went wrong. The message disappeared. Now, this had me thinking for a while as to why this happened, because I find it very strange that it did happen. Part of the reason is, for whatever reason, when you use overflow and you put overflow X or overflow Y on an element, it seems that Flexbox gets confused or something and shrinks the information that's inside that element when it's 0%. Right? So the initial flex item, which is the conversation message, has a flex value of 0.000%. Now, normally that means go as minimal as possible to fit the contents inside of it, right? However, for whatever reason, when I use overflow X, it thinks that the height of the element is somehow 0 pixels now. So the only way I could get around fixing this problem is to come down and go .conversation message and set the flex value of 0.0 auto like that. And when I do this, the message comes back. All right, so a little strange. I'm not sure as to why I had to do that, but it seems to be a confusion between overflow and Flexbox, and it might be just a Chrome-based thing. I haven't tested this on other browsers, but it might be just a Chrome-based thing. If anybody knows what the issue might be there, please let me know, because I'd love to know myself. But yeah, it's just something I found. Now, just to finish this off, I'm going to come down and I go text overflow is ellipsis and save. And now we've got what we want now, which is when the message gets to a certain width, we go ... and then cut off. All right. So I'm going to remove the rest of the messages here and just make sure it still works. I'm going to save. Everything looks good again. Okay. So that's it for this video. So the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to add a lot more conversation items to fill this entire conversation list and deal with the issues of overflow and scrolling in this conversation list area. Okay. So I'll see you all in the next video. Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to be working on adding more conversation items. So let's get to it. So a nice simple video here. Basically what we're going to be doing is making this conversation item active by default, i.e. in a background of dark blue like that, and then add some conversation items to make up the rest of the conversation list. Then we'll also deal with the scrolling aspect of it. So we'll do the active part first, and to handle that, really easy, just put active as a class on the conversation. And it goes dark, right? And that's because we already had a CSS rule for that. Now, to get the items, I'm going to add a snippet. You can get it as a resource linked to this video as well. So it's LD, FC, app, more conversation items, like so. And when I tab this, I get a whole bunch of conversations. Right? When I save it, this is the result I see. Now, as I said, we've got some overflowing issues, so we can quickly fix this by using overflow on the conversation list. So, new rule, conversation list. All right, set the overflow of Y to not be hidden, but to be scroll. All right, and when I save this, we get this result here now. Pretty cool. We've got the scrolling of the conversation items. We do have a little scroll bar here on the right-hand side, which looks okay on Mac. However, I believe on Windows, it's not as clean. So if you do happen to not like it, you can add this : -webkit scroll bar, and that will fix it for Chrome on Windows. And that's all I want to do for this video. So in the next video, what we're going to do is start looking at the messages inside of this chat window. Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to be working on building chat messages. So let's get to it. Okay, so the point of the video is basically to go from having no messages whatsoever here to having a couple of messages. One that represents your comment, which is the blue one here, and one that represents the person you're talking to without their picture. And that's the gray one here, right? So what I'm seeing here at the moment is, number one, they're aligned to the very bottom of the chat window. So unlike most text that flows from top to bottom, we're going to be having it flowing in the opposite direction, right? So the most recent chat will always be at the very bottom, and then as you get older, they'll go higher up, right? So that will already indicate that we need to change the flex direction of this. But firstly, before we get to that, let's actually design these messages out in terms of HTML. So what I'm thinking is, the first thing I'm going to say is each message is kind of a row, right? So it's a row in this list area, and then inside of that row, we have the actual message, right? Which is a piece of text. So that this bit here could be a piece of text, this big gray bit and the big blue bit. And then underneath it, we have the time in which it occurred, right? So this is how I see the HTML being designed. I'm going to come over and I'm going to create a div for the row for one of those messages. So we'll go div class and we'll say message row, like so. And I'll then close that off. And then I want to have a div for the actual text here. So I'm going to div class equals message text, like that. And this will contain the actual text. So we'll say okay then to represent this okay then part here. And then directly underneath that, we want to have the date. So I'll have another div for the date, and I might call this message-time. And then I'll just put the time, such as, in this case, April 16, right? Now, I'm going to quickly jump over to the initial tab and then save this. And basically, we get this thing at the top here, okay? So we can see that we do have a row, and it does have two things directly underneath each other. Cool. So I'm just going to copy this for the moment and then paste it again. And we're just going to change the text up to match the second comment here. So the second comment says, yeah, I think it's best we do that, full stop. And it also says April 16. Cool. So I come back over, check this. And once again, we can see things are at the very top. And the second message is directly under the first one. So you're like, okay, that's not how we want it. We want to have it so that it's in the bottom and going in a reverse order. So let's address that problem now before we apply the styles. So I come over to my flex.css and I'm going to do a search for the chat message list selector that I have here. And all I'm going to do is firstly go onto the right tab so we can see the changes here. I'm going to put a display of flex here. And then I'm going to set a flex flow of, let's say, column reverse, no wrap. And when I save this, now we can see that the information is on the very bottom and the first message is actually at the very bottom followed by the next message. And that's kind of what we see here, right? Now, the reason why I'm saying that it should be in reverse is if we think of a normal chat, the older the message, the further up it goes. The newer the message, the closer to the bottom it goes. That's just how chat applications work, right? So that's why I'm doing it in this direction. Now, I'm going to quickly just add some CSS to this. But before I do, what I need to define now is which messages belong to the person we're talking with and which messages are ours, all right? So in the HTML we've defined so far, we haven't actually indicated this, right? So how I'm going to do it is on the row, I'm going to indicate who owns the message. And to do that, I'm just going to use another class. So for my message, I'm just going to put u-message like so. And for the other person, I'm just going to use other-message. Now, in terms of the look and feel at the moment, nothing's changed here. But now I'm going to go and add some styles to this. So coming over to my base.css, I'm going to come to the very bottom here, and I'm going to add another snippet. Once again, this snippet will be included in the resources for this video. So I go LD, FC, app, and then it's chat, message, initial, styles. And when I tab this, we're now going to get a whole bunch of stuff. So the first thing we're going to get is just a little bit of margin bottom for the actual rows, so they space between each other, just so we can work out where one message starts and when the next one ends. Sorry, when one ends and the next one starts. Then I've got a selector for message time, which is the time here. And I'm just increasing the font size a little bit and giving it a darkish grey color. Then the text itself, I'm adding a bit of padding around it. I'm increasing the font size and just adding a little bit of bottom margin so that you can see the difference between the text and the date. Then for the message text that belongs to myself, I'm adding a background color of that blue color here, the lighter blue, I think. The color of EEE for the text, a little border just around it so you can kind of see a little bit of border, and then I'm adding a border radius, right, that kind of represents my speech bubble, right? And then I'm just doing the same thing for the other person, just with grey colors and black colors, right? So if I save this now, what you're going to get is exactly what we intended on having by the end of the video, right? If I look between the two, you don't see any difference. So that's it for this video, a very short video here. But in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on setting the proper size of these things. So at the moment, they're going all the way across the screen, and we want to deal with the alignment and have messages from one person be on one side and messages from another person being on the other side. So I'll see you in the next video. Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to be working on sizing chat messages. So let's get to it. Okay, so the purpose of this video is to get our speech bubbles going from this, where it's 100% across the screen, to this, where if we have a lot of text, it only goes as far as 70% of the window. And if it's less than 70%, it's only as big as the text that's inside of it, okay? Now, I'm going to be honest with you, this is not a simple situation, so it's going to require a lot of thought on your part, but I suggest you go and try this for yourself first. So pause the video, give it a go, and come back to me in a moment. Were you able to work it out? If so, fantastic. It means you've got a really good understanding of how Flexbox works. If not, well, let's do it together right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the text for the gray speech bubble, because that's all we had here for the moment. So basically what I'm going to do is come down, and I already have this in my clipboard. So I'm just going to paste in that text. I'm going to save it. We can see that it goes all the way across the screen and then on to the next line. All right. So let's go through some of the things that you guys probably would have tried. So the first thing you probably would have tried was, let's go message row for the message, the actual row of the message. And maybe you did something like 0, 0, 70%, right? Or you may have said, I want it to grow and not maybe shrink and then 70%. When you save this, well, clearly you got this, right? Where it's growing, but it's growing in the wrong direction. It's growing in the column direction. And that's because a message row is inside of the chat message list, which has a flex direction set on it to column reverse. So we can't utilize the sizing at the row level, right? So the next thing you would have tried was, okay, what about the message text and the message time? Let's set the sizes of those things. So you would have gone, okay, message text and dot message time. And you would have got nothing there. And then you would have said, okay, cool, I'm going to go up and make message row display flex, like so, and save that. And then we would have ran into this and went, oh boy, what's happened here? You would go, you probably remember to go 0, 0 auto for that height issue problem. And you would have got to this point. Then you would have realized, oh, wait a minute, the date's actually in the wrong direction. So then all of a sudden you go, all right, I'm going to have to change the flex direction to be column. And when you save that, then you realize you're back to the 100% problem again. And the 70% wasn't actually abided by, right? And it was always growing all the way across anyway. So this is not the right approach, obviously. We can't use message row to define the flex container for the message text and message time and still be able to get that 70%, right? What you can do is say, okay, I'm going to wrap the message text and the message time with another div. So we come back over to the HTML and we're going to add a new div here. And I'm just going to call it message details, like so. And go, I'm going to put this and this inside of it. Whoops. And then tab this properly. And then do the same for the one down here. And put this stuff inside of it as well. Tab that over. Now if you do this, nothing changes at the moment, but we need to change a few things over here. So now we're not going to have a flex direction on the message row, like so. And that creates this situation. And then you say, okay, I'm going to set explicitly for the detail section to be 70% wide. So we're going to say this is message details and get rid of the message text part. All right. And if we save this, we now get to this position. So you're like, cool. Now we've gotten to the point where we've restricted it to 70% wide. However, you can see that it's always 70% wide. So then you're like, okay, maybe I need to make the message details a flex container. So you set a display flex on this, all right? And then you realize it gets really small, but not only that, then the date, once again, has come on the right-hand side because the flex direction is row, right? So you go, okay, cool. I'm now going to set the direction to be the correct direction. So you go column, and you get back to this situation. All right, but we're still going 100% wide. Now, because we've changed the direction of the max-axis to be column, the flex of setting a flex value for any item that's inside of the message detail area is only going to adjust the height of the information inside of it, right? So if I set a flex piece on this message text, it's going to affect the height, not the width. Same with the date. It's not going to affect the height. It's going to affect the width. So you're like, okay, well, I can't really make it be minimum size up to that maximum size using the flex property. Just can't do it. So then I'm stuck. What do I do? Well, if you think carefully, you can actually do something like this. You can say, I'm going to utilize align items and set it to flex start. Because if you think about it, the items inside of the message details element right now are utilizing a stretch capacity, right? Think about the chat HTML. The message text and the message time are flowing in a column-based direction, but they're also utilizing the stretch capabilities of Flexbox. We don't want that stretch capability. We want it to be as small as it needs to be, right? i.e., if we use flex start, it's going to actually shrink to whatever the minimums or the minimum size it can be, right? So if I save this, now we get that result, which is exactly what we want. All right, let's compare the two, and you can see now that everything looks great. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is I noticed up here that the text is not the same as this example here. So I'm just going to quickly jump into the chat HTML and change that. So sidebar, conversation lists, and I'm going to put here, okay then. And that's just for consistency. So that's it for this video. We've got ourselves into a good situation where now we've got the speech bubbles being a size that makes sense. In the next video, we're now going to force any comments that are made by us to be aligned on the right-hand side of the chat window over here. Now, you may have already worked out how we can do that. It's actually really straightforward, but I'll leave it for the next video. I'll see you then. Hello, everyone. In this video, we're going to be working on aligning chat messages. So let's get to it. Okay, so the objective of this video is pretty simple. It's to get this text from here, which is our comment speech, to the right-hand side. And basically what I mean by that is that any message that has a class of u-message on it should be aligned to the right-hand side, okay? So with that said, I'm going to recommend you guys try this yourself. So pause the video, give it a go, and come back to me in a moment. Were you able to work it out? If so, fantastic. If not, well, I'll do it right now. So I'm going to come back to my original tab so that we are working with the right space here. And the first thing I would have tried was to go .umessage.message text. And I would have tried to use align self, right? And set it to flex end. So it will go to the very end here, right? And save that. And it kind of tries to get over to the very right-hand side of the screen, but obviously it only gets as far as the 70% width of the message details container that's apparent of the message text and the message time. And that makes sense because the message details is told to flex only 70% of the overall size of the window here, right? So what we need to do as a result of that is we want to be able to align the message details part to push that over to the right as well. Now, because it's part of a row, right? So the message row has a flex direction by default of row. So we can use justify content and set the value to flex end to get any children, i.e. in this case, the message details div, to align itself to the end here. So that's what I'm going to do. So to do that, I'm just going to use the .uMessage. All right, so this is the message row with this class on it, and go justify content flex end. And when I do this, now we get the message text all the way across. Now we just need to get the date over, but that's pretty straightforward. We can do that by just adding to this selector here, uMessage.message time. And when I save this, now we've got everything where we want it. The time is on the very right-hand side here, so it's the text, and everything is nice and sweet, right? And that was all we needed to do for this video. So in the next video, what we're going to do is add an image to the other message here so that we know exactly who we're speaking to at all times. So I'll see you all then. Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to be working on adding chat profile pictures. So let's get to it. Okay, so the objective of this video is to add an image to the left-hand side of anyone who's writing a message. So we're going to go from this to this, right? And also, we still need to maintain that 70% width here, right? So that's the challenge of the video. So let's get to it. And basically, what I'm going to do first is add the HTML for the image. Now, the HTML I'm going to write is only ever going to be under a row that has an other dash message class on it. So directly under that, I'm going to add a new div and give it a class of user picture container, right? Inside of it, I'm going to have an image with a source of images, profiles, me. You can add whatever image you like, that's up to you. All right, like so, and save. And if I'm on the right tab here, we're going to see my image pop up next to the message. Now, the problem is, well, there's two problems. One is we need to style the image, so it's rounded and things like that. The other problem is that the width now is beyond that 70% threshold. And that's because the 70% threshold is applied to this message description area here. Or message details, I should say. So let's take care of the styling for the image first. So I'm going to come to base CSS and I'm going to create a snippet. Well, not create a snippet, run a snippet. You go app, chat, message, image, styles. And again, this is a resource link to the video. And you'll get this CSS, which basically sets up some dimensions, widths, heights, and border radius, and also adds a little bit of margin, right? So we've got some space between these items. So when I save that, we get this result, okay? Which it's close to what we want, but not quite. And that's because of the fact that we've got sizing issues with this box here. So how can we fix the sizing problem now that we've added an image? I want you guys to have a think about it. So pause the video, go and have a try, and come back to me in a moment. So were you able to work it out? If so, fantastic. If not, well, we'll go through it right now. So when I think about this, the 70% that I've applied to the details, I can't really do that anymore. We need to take that away from this speech bubble and apply it further up, right? So basically, we need something that surrounds both the image and the message details, right? If we take a look at the HTML we've got right now, we can see that we've got the message row, right? However, the message row, or each message row, is flowing in a column reverse direction. So if we apply a size of 70% initially for the row, it's only going to affect the height. It's not going to affect the width, right? So similar to what we did with the message text and time, we're going to have to add another parent container element here. So what I'm going to do is create another div, give it a class, and I'm going to call it message container. All right. And I'm going to put everything that's there inside of it, like so. Like that. And I'm going to do the same for the one above, just for consistency. Like that. And then we'll just tab all this stuff over. All right. So then we get this result where everything is kind of flowing under each other, and that's because the message container is still a block level element. So we'll come over and change that. So dot message container, and we're going to set it to be display of flex and save that. Now we get the image next to it this time, and we still get the message details in the order that we want it, i.e. in a column-based direction. However, we have lost the growing aspect of it. So that's because we've set the message container, which is a parent element, to not grow here. So the first thing we can do is say we're not going to have it grow anyway. We're going to set it to 70%. So we're going to take away this flex value here for the message details, and we're going to give it to the container. And when I save that, now the parent container will span 70%, but the message details will not. In fact, the message details at the moment is only going to be as wide as it needs to be to fill in the content, i.e. that's why the speech bubble is so small here. So all we need to do is come to message details, set a flex on it to have it grow, not shrink, and set initial size of 0%. And if we do this properly and save, well, we get back to the result that we want. And now this whole thing is officially 70%. And if I toggle between the two tabs, you can see it's exactly the same. And we still have the same speech bubble over here that works for when you don't have an image. So that's it for this video. In the next video, which is going to be the last video for this series, or for this app, we're going to add more messages to the chat and then basically deal with the scrolling problem. So I'll see you all in the next video. Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to be working on the finishing touches. So let's get to it. Okay, so for this video, we're just going to finish off the amount of messages we want in the actual window here and deal with the scrolling, okay? So all I'm going to do, we'll do this really quickly, is under the last message I had, I'm just going to use another snippet and go LD FC app remaining chat messages, like so. And a bunch of HTML comes up. Now, obviously, this HTML is linked to a resource that accompanies this video. So I'm going to save it now. And we have the issue of it overflowing. But we can quickly fix that by finding our chat message list ID here as a selector and then setting overflow Y to scroll. And when I refresh, you can now see that the messages are hidden behind the chat title, and I can scroll the list up and down. So that's it. And finally, you have completed your very first chat application using nothing but Flexbox and also some CSS to make it look pretty. So I'll see you all in the next video.